Thank you. Honorable.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. I also welcome the report, except that as I was looking at the other side of the table, I could only see man. The executive is Mzi Wezinsizwa, and I should think that we need to correct that.
Yeah.
Chair, maybe I might ask a question that was asked a long time ago. You see, during those good olden days, people would be staying in the camps, going to school, or staying in their residences outside the country. But in South Africa, it's the other way around. It's free for all. Now the question is, if we were to say, please round up all those without scarce skills and take them back to their countries, would that be possible? Because this thing is worrying the people of South Africa. That is free for all in their country. Yet you've got our Home Affairs, there are immigration offices and officers, and by the look of things, nothing is happening. I can say the borders, we patrol them almost every day. There's Home Affairs, there's Border Management Authority, there's police, there's defense. But what about those inside the country? Because I understand there are areas here where you would say this is a Nigerian area. South Africans are not allowed to come in. Are they all having permanent residence in South Africa? This other area is Somalians. You see, if you are from the Bundus as Lalin, what is going to happen in the next coming 20 years is, you say, I'm in Madiba by clan. In the next coming 20 years, my clan name is going to vanish because these guys from outside marry our daughters and sisters, and they change their surnames, not to be Wala, to be Mohammed. So in the next coming 20 years, there will be no Wala in that village. Hence, when you look at these chat groups, you'll find one being proposed as a mayor in that area. What do we do about that? Let us not run away from, okay, not running away. Let us not be confused by this word xenophobia. Where does it come from? One day, people of South Africa will turn against us to say, we are tired of you, government of South Africa, we are taking over now because we have allowed our country to be. What is this today? Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Lechan and Honorable Nash.
I arrived late, Chair, and I think that is why I don't have a mic. I think it must be corrected. We know how many people are coming here. Whether I arrived late here or I arrived at what time, I must have my own mic. I don't want to share with the Honorable Motis for obvious reasons. So, Chair, there's quite a lot of issues that I picked up from the conversations that everyone else has had. I want to suggest, Chair, on the scarce skills first. I don't know when was this list of the scarce skills presented to us, and I don't know when it was ever reviewed. I want to suggest that we get given that list, because you can't have a list that we received in 1994 being the same list that we're operating with. We just need to be very careful of having a list that does not change, because a lot has changed. So if we are talking scarce skills, you might find that we have covered a lot of ground. We are no longer in need of those scarce skills that that is being mentioned here today. So I want to suggest that as a committee, officially we are getting that list, we review that list. We look at what is scarce skills. Because it's our responsibility as the committee, I think, to be able to review things that we see that are abnormal, if I want to, were to put it like that. I was in Goodwood prison to visit a friend of mine who is in prison. Everyone who's in prison, by the way, says that I've not committed a crime. So I went to Goodwood to see a friend. He still says that I have not done anything. I was introduced to a male prisoner, a foreign national, who had committed a crime somewhere in Khayelitsha, but he finds himself in Goodwood prison. He says, I have not been to court, and it's many of us who are here, and the main reason is that they can't trace who I am. That's what he says. He says, they can't trace who I am. I asked him, do you know who you are? He says, I know, but how did you arrive here if the country doesn't know? So, and I asked myself, okay, if that's the situation, we have a lot of foreign nationals in our prisons who are feeding off our system, who have not been found guilty of anything, who have not been tried. And our role as Home Affairs in that respect is nowhere to be seen, because we are the authority in terms of those things of fingerprints and all of that, and who enters and who goes out. It's worrying, Minister, that we have such problems. The right people must be in prison for the right reasons. But if you find people sitting there just eating the whole day, nothing is happening to them, it gets to worry all of us, and it should worry all South Africans. So we need to really attend to those problems. I said in the last committee, physically, that I attended, Chair will remember, I said largely the problems of Home Affairs are created by lack of standards. I mentioned that the office Yasemtata, the office Yasemenling do not have the same standards. Of course, because the other one is in a mall, the other one is just somewhere, in a shibin somewhere there. Because that office is a shibin. So, how are we able to assess our work as Home Affairs if we have different standards for different towns or different offices? I even suggested, Chair, that when we go and do site visits, we must not tell Home Affairs where we want to go, or they must not tell us where we must go. We must say, as Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, that we want to visit this area ourselves, so that we are not taken to a direction that looks better. We want to see where it doesn't look better. So we are looking for the same standards from Home Affairs. What I find in Palabur should not be different from what I find in Aituju. I once told the DG here, you'll remember, we're dealing with the issues of long queues. You came here and reported that there are no long queues in East London. I demonstrated to him with a picture. And I said, the problem with Home Affairs is that all your presentations are very good. But on the ground, it's a different arrangement. So I'm saying, Minister, it's the first time I'm speaking in your presence. I want you to be able to understand that there has been issues that we have been raising, which we think should be attended with immediate effect by your team. So, in basic education, today, scarce skills in South Africa is math and science. If that is not on the list, you must know we have a big problem. Members that sit in the portfolio committee on education, basic education, they'll tell you, schools do not have math and science teachers. We have to go and get outside. And most of those that we have found in Free State, they are coming from Ghana. Some of them were deployed or they worked in the Eastern Cape. The conditions were not favorable. They moved to the Free State. So the scarce skills we're talking about must consider things like what I'm saying, Chairperson. Math and science is a big problem. And we're not going anywhere as a country without producing those with math and science. This thing of border management is our implementing agency. As a department and as a committee, we established it, Chair. I don't know if we have made an assessment. I mean, we can't run something for the past year now, and we have not made an assessment in terms of its work. I don't know, like, I saw a BMA car between Butterworth and East London with a blue light doing those things. I was like, did we ever approve BMA to be police? Is there something that we're missing? The Deputy Minister.
We discussed and closed that chapter.
Okay, noted. I think we'll deal with that. I see it's arising also from Honorable Tejana. Honorable Mufani.
Move to the department. There's just one issue that I just wanted to also raise on the issue of citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. We have a number of people in South Africa who are South African citizens, who are born of a South African mother, a South African father, but they don't have documentation to prove that they are South African citizens. They don't have documentation to prove that because of the 4,700 DNA tests that they need to pay for. I've received very heartbreaking cases, Honorable Chair, of young girls, young boys whose life has come to a standstill because they can't get documentation to prove that they are South African citizens. So I want to know on these presentations that we have received, how are we going to resolve those issues, particularly for the poor of the poorest? You can't expect a person who's unemployed, who's poor, to be able to pop out 4,700 rand for a DNA test. It's not possible. So what alternative path is available for these particular individuals? I've about close to 10 cases, Honorable Chairperson, which I will bring to the attention of the Home Affairs team here. So how are we going to address those issues? Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, honourable members. I think you have dealt with most of the issues that we will request the department to respond and comment. And in this last matter, I'm sure DDG Sigama is preparing for that. There are three issues which we need to appreciate in relation to the porous borders. The fifth administration initiated a process on the basis of input from the public in relation to the porous borders. And we did create a legislation that introduced the Border Management Authority. And from that period to date, there's significant work that has been done. And I think as members of Parliament, we ought to appreciate significant move on certain areas, but acknowledge its weaknesses, which ourselves, in fact, in the 2 budget votes debates, we've also highlighted in terms of the significant funding from BMA to carry some of the responsibility. So I thought I might just take a reminder so that we don't ground this meeting on the matter that ourselves as Parliament, we've acknowledged from members of the public, introduced a legislation that established the BMA, though there are weaknesses which yourself have raised here. So the matter is how we align the white paper in relation with the current challenges that we're dealing with. And I'm quite sure that when they were going to receive the annual performance of the Border Management Authority, some of these issues will arise and able to contribute and understand some of the weaknesses and progress that we've been made. And it's us, members of Parliament, that will listen to members of the public around this challenge to the Border Management Authority and took a decision to establish this entity. So I thought I must make that point to the member. 2 issues, Minister, which are political. I think we don't need to play with words. You must say to the committee, you are referring to the GNU intent statement that creates obstacle for us to move faster, to develop a bill for us to be able to interact with members of the public. And in my earlier statement, I have cautioned that we'll listen carefully in terms of the responses we have given in the security cluster responses in terms of the period in which this bill must come to Parliament and be dealt with. When you listen carefully to the presentation of Vulindlela, it appears that most of the priorities that Vulindlela refer in relation to Home Affairs are in progress or incomplete, and you may need to identify what is the obstacle that deter the department to conclude this process and to bring the bill to Parliament in terms of the time frames that we need to deal with. Because GNU does not have a policy. It is a statement of intent, and this matter has been raised. We're running this white paper from the, the legacy report. So you must be able to say to these members of the committee, these are the critical obstacles that will delay us to make sure that we facilitate the bill that must come to Parliament. And I think that is we might just try to elevate this area so that there must not be confusion on how the executive and Parliament process its work from the 6th and the 5th administration. So there must be clear areas. Why are you saying this matter will come later in 2027, and whereas we've been dealing with this matter a year? And the understanding is that if the supplementary issues that must arise from the Vulindlela report may still go through the process of the executive that you have outlined. Why are you saying that you must get a legal opinion on this white paper? Because our understanding is that the President, when he outlined his priorities in the 2 SONAs, the reforms, he appreciated that as a process of cabinet, where cabinet has approved all the inputs that must be dealt with. And there was an extensive consultation on this white paper process. So you need to articulate clearly to members. Of course, in relation to the national NDP, the last point is on the tax matters that have been raised here. what are those issues that you are raising? Members are raising these issues so that at the time the bill is being tabled in Parliament, we're able to solidify views and also as we enter to the public consultation with the public around the bill, there's clarity on what are the issues and how must consult, because at the end, is Parliament that's going to consider this bill. So, because of our main issues that have been raised, we'll start with the Director General. We'll allocate who are going to respond on the issues. Then invite the Deputy Minister, and the Minister will close. If there's a follow-up, we'll entertain that, but minding that we're going for sitting now at 2 o'clock. I'll just use my discretion as I will take follow-ups. But obviously, you still have to interact with this matter because you have to come back to the committee, including the matters that are related to the Border Management Authority in relation to the white paper. DJ?
No, thanks, Chairperson, and thank you, honourable members, for the questions, quite detailed and incisive. So, DDG Mavuso will respond to issues that are related to the white paper, and then Mr. Segama on matters that are related to civics, Mr. Simons on the presentation that we made on Operation Bulletin, and then Mr. Matthews on the general work visa and issues related to law enforcement. Maybe let me start by dealing with the question that was raised by Honorable Kojane. And I'll also attempt, Chair, to address the issue that you've raised around tax. I think it was also raised earlier by another honorable member. So, Honorable Kojane, the critical skills list is the same question that Honorable Mishu raised, but is not here at the moment. So the genesis of the critical skills list is that it's the mandate of the Department of Higher Education to consider a critical skills list informed by the Human Resource Development Strategy of the country. And what they do normally, they lead the process, do consultations with all government departments, industry, and then the process ends at NEDLEC. It's a NEDLEC-led process. And once that process is done, including Home Affairs being party to that, we then publish the critical skills list, which we receive from the Department of Higher Education and Training. Of course, it does take into account new trends that emerge. It takes into consideration new industry activities. And of course, as the presentation was made, that the last one that was updated was actually in 2022, whereas the previous one had been in 2014. There was that lapse in the gap. Now, if you were to look at the critical skills list, Honorable Ngubane, you raised an issue around local skills vis-a-vis what we bring into the country. I think we need to accept, Honorable Ngubane, we're part of a global society. I was just checking with DDG Mavuso. At the University of KZN, for example, there's a study called quantum dynamics. And the leading professor in the world is Professor Petroscian Francesco from Italy. But he became attracted to that university because it provides him with a space to do that work. Now, if that professor was not able to come through that critical skills list, we would not have benefited as a country. Further down the road in Rosebank, Chairperson, we have a center known as the Center for High Performance Computing. One of the fastest It hosts one of the fastest supercomputers in the world. And people that are working there are all international experts. And the reason they come into the country is because they're interested in the development of this country. So we must always balance our security considerations, development, and also economic considerations. So why was it updated? It's always updated, and the good thing is that the critical skills list, the minister can update it as and when there are new trends. And the last one was updated on the 3rd of October. It's gazetted, Honorable Checha. If you want to look at it, it's on the website of the department. So it's there. It's a gazetted document that you can look at. But for sure, we can share with you. Activities. And I said it here the last time that down here in the Western Cape, you have a Koeberg, a nuclear facility. Majority of those engineers that came through to come and work there are from Framatome. And they had to meet the requirements of critical skills. And similarly in the Northern Cape, those that are working on the square kilometer array. Honorable Kojani, you also asked a question around the 108. It's not individuals, it's companies. And these are companies that range from your automotive sector. Almost all of them, Mr. Simons, that are operating in Roslyn, that are operating in Rebecca, that are operating in East London, all of them are part of the Trusted Employer Scheme. Mining houses, the same. Banks, the same. Pharmaceutical companies, services industry, which will include financial houses and auditing firms. You also have those that are in the energy sector. They are part of that Trusted Employer Scheme. And I suppose at some point, Chair, we might want to share with the committee, if we do get the data, what they've brought into the country in terms of investment. So that's just a response to that. Honorable Ross, you asked a question around the shortage of staff. I recall we were sitting in the same committee in 2021. You asked us to put together a business case to National Treasury, which we did, and we were able to get 742 positions, which we were able to fill within a period of 6 months. So that was the first business case. The second business case, of course, the economic outlook of the country is not looking good. Treasury still has not responded to us. We've sent through a third one, and we were hopeful that Treasury will be responsive. So what is it that we have done? We've now entered into partnerships through Business Unity South Africa, and it is through this initiative where we've said to businesses, we understand that Treasury will not be able to fund every other activity. And through that initiative, Deloitte and FNB have said they're willing to support the department, particularly because of these critical areas. Those are not the only two companies. There are many companies that are keen to support the department. So the 35 young people are not students. These are legally qualified young people. Similarly to the 16 that we had employed, or we've employed as the department. Obviously, that's not adequate. I think we did present to this committee and indicated that our approved capacity for the department is 18,000. We're sitting at about 7,200. So the reality is we can't say Treasury is not funding us. We're engaging various sectors to look at what can we get from there. And of course, on an annual basis, as we'll show in the annual report, we do lose a number of people that join other sectors. So they go through a period of training. They've just been trained, and similarly the lawyers and also internal staff, including training that was provided by Dr. Lubisi and the team to say these are the do's and don'ts when we're processing visas. And the categories that they're looking at are mainly your temporary residence visas. I suppose, Minister and DM, questions around the BMA, for sure there'll be an opportune time for the BMA to come and share what is it that they're doing in that space. And then I think there was a question from Honorable Mohale on the DNA test, the last one. Honorable Mohale, the requirement for the payment for the DNA test, it's more on the side of the Department of Health. However, for the 10 cases, I think Mr. Sigama will respond what is it that we can do if we do get the files. And normally, once there's a report from social development, we do waive the fees in consultation with the Department of Health for those that you have referred to. Just to correct you as well, Honorable Mohale, you indicated that there were Afghans that came into the Republic. They did not come into the Republic. They went to Zambia from Zimbabwe. So you won't find them in the country because they could not proceed to the Republic. But the reality is, as lawmakers that are sitting here, the current laws allow us to allow them into the country because of provisions that are there in the law. You will recall the former minister just indicated that he just shouted to make them go away, but the provisions in terms of the law allow them to be in the country. Honorable Mohale, I think if you read Agenda 2063 very well, it says the Africa we want. And it speaks about mobility of skills. And we can't say we prefer this to that. It opens up ourselves as a country to anyone, wherever they are coming from, not only from the continent, because there's a number of initiatives that we're undertaking as a country where we're benefiting from skills from all over the world. Just further down here in Pinetown, you have an office of the local Square Kilometre Array project, which is a global project. And they're bringing skills from all over the world. So we can't be choosy in terms of which skills we consider and which ones. On the tax implications, so the issue that we currently are considering, we should be able to finalize, it's really around the general principles relating to the treaty, but also to cross-border work and profits that SARS needs to consider. You are all familiar with the fact that SARS needs to tax income generated in the country, and therefore, in our discussions with SARS, they indicated that currently they have a tax treaty with 25 countries on the continent, and then about 56 all over at a global level, and the rest of the world. So they are currently considering whether do you move from 6 months or whether do you move to 12 months in terms of the tax exemption. I suppose for us what will work will be for longer, for a longer period instead of the current one. So maybe let me then hand over to the other colleagues, starting with Mr. Mavuso on my left, and then Mr. Sigama, Mr. Matthews, and Mr. Simons. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. Just to be brief, Chair, Honorable Ross, I do take the issue around the criticism on the lack of evidence-based policy making on the white paper. So the supplementary work that we are doing, obviously, will cover a number of those issues. And the missed opportunity on job creation, exactly I think the Minister did indicate, we're looking at ensuring that we have a policy and a legislation that will enable us to attract the right skills in order for us to grow our economy and create more job opportunities. I do note the issues I think Mr. Simons will respond to, Honorable Guban. On the issues that Honorable Kojane raised on the information on what public support was on the white paper, there are various areas. For an example, when we talk about delinking citizenship, for example, from immigration, those are some of the issues that people were saying this administrative progression is a problem. On the issues of getting citizenship through marriage, for an example, there's been many cases of marriages of convenience where people, they marry, they get what they call, they don't even stay with the spouse, to say that that's one of the areas that we need to look into in terms of our policy. I mean, there was also an abuse of retired persons' visas. I mean, we have seen people as young as me applying, some of them even younger, applying for retired persons visas. And in South Africa, we've got the regulated age of officially recognized age. But when someone was 35 years old, we actually intercepted one visa that was applied for at our mission a few years ago, about 7 years ago. Somebody was 32 years old applying for a retirement visa. So we've had that particular problem and the amount of money we need for the person for the upkeeping. So those are some of the areas that in the public consultation we raised. Now, the slide 15 you're referring to asylum seekers to show good cause why they didn't apply the illegal in the country. You remember we've got people who are trafficked, coming into the country against their own will. People who are smuggled and they are made slave in different areas. When somebody is able to get out of that environment, they're already wanting to indicate, and when they cooperate, obviously, with us to ensure that we apprehend the traffickers, so we look into their situation differently. So those are the type of people who have been able to give us. Those are some of the examples, but there could be many other examples that I could cite. Now, we do take the note, Honorable Mokgale, the fact that the white paper did ignite a lot of discussion, and it continues to do so. And I think it's very healthy for a public policy document of this nature. Now, you're asking a very difficult question around citizenship for children of illegal migrants who are born in South Africa. Obviously, there are some of those cases. We have had previous matters of like that are also brought to the minister for a decision, because what happens in that instance, when there can be proof that this person cannot have any other citizenship, there's a process that we ought to follow in terms of citizenship act in that regard. Otherwise, we will not leave people stateless. But I think there's a thorough engagement to say how do we then get into a consideration by a minister to grant an exemption for such. Then the issue of the first country principle, again, this is not sacrosanct. If there are issues at international level where, for example, you talk about countries have a relationship that you could actually, let's take, as you are correctly saying, that we agree that we will bring refugees for a particular country because there's a good cause that as a country we have taken a position that we need to rescue the people coming of that particular environment. Again, that's a political decision. Unfortunately, as a bureaucrat, I'm not competent to, but I'm just raising the issue that those are some of the considerations that can be given. And then on the, I think Honorable Mrisem, I do take the issue, I think the same way I've raised the issue around human traffickers and syndicates who carry out their activities. I think Honorable Mrisem raised a number of issues. Maybe Mr. Skama can deal with the issue of the time frame. But again, what I would suggest that also Yusuf will deal with those. Maybe just to conclude, Honorable Chetan, you're raising a very fundamental. We do have standards for officers where we've got what we refer to office accommodation standards for different types of officers. But there's a historical problem that we've had, that some of the facilities that are new, some of the facilities are old, based on the fact that the accommodation there, for example, they're utilizing the Mthatha office. The Mthatha office is in the Heritage Building. We can't do anything about some of the changes that are there. It's protected in terms of the legislation, so we can't make any changes. But I'm happy to indicate that through the support of the minister, we have had a conversation to relocate that office to the mall in Mthatha. There's construction work that will start for us to be able to do that. But the issue is just not specifically talking about Mthatha alone, but it's the issue of creating standards. We definitely do have. But the bigger issue is that the type of office infrastructure that we get, I mean, we give the specification to Public Works that this is what we need, the office of this nature, this size, but I can tell you most of the time, we get something opposite to what we're looking for. And unfortunately, in terms of the Kiama legislation, all non-immovable infrastructure of government belongs to Public Works. So those are some of the engagement that we continue to have. But also we're adopting a strategy that says we should not only about bricks and mortar in terms of where we're located, but increasing our mobility to go to communities, because we've realized that the issue that Honorable Mokgale is raising of children of South Africans who are undocumented, because of lack of close proximity to offices, people give birth, they don't do anything about it, they end up dying. They leave those children undocumented. So if we are enforcing a strategy of actually going to the communities rather than coming to us. That is why the issue of increasing the footprint around our mobile. Also, not only that, creating different channels. We did talk about introduction of kiosk and other options. So we are working on those things. They are taking longer. Some of them obvious due to number of reasons. Some of them obvious are budget related because some of it we have to really rejig, find a way to squeeze the little budget, because this department budget is actually something very difficult to comprehend with. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Honourable Chair, Minister, Deputy Minister, Honourable Members. Now, a lot has been said, but I'll pay more attention to issues of citizenship. Suffice to say that 3 types of citizenship. One can acquire citizenship through birth, wherein both parents are South African, and that child automatically becomes a South African. And the second type is more about citizenship by descent, wherein one of the parents is South African and the other one is not, and obviously that child becomes a South African. Of course, during the process of registration, just to pay attention to Honourable Mukhali's question, we have to look into the supporting documents that are being submitted by the parents. At times, you find that some of the parents, they don't even bring ID documents or those requirements as listed in the Act, and that then prolongs our investigation and also to make sure that that child is registered into our system. So to focus on the case at hand, so we would like to get the list of the 10 so that we go through all the requirements that are required, and at the end we'll be able to then categorize them and make sure that they fall into one of the categories that I've just listed. Then the last type of citizenship is more about citizenship by naturalization, wherein one had to stay in the country for a specific period, not less than 5 years or so, and then we look into the police clearance and all those other requirements that are there, including the language test, as one has indicated before. And once all those requirements are fulfilled, we then sit and have an adjudication committee that sits and evaluates and also perform the so-called due diligence before that naturalization certificate can be granted to that particular person. There was a question that was raised by Honourable Mushat on how long does, once the person has applied, how long does it take for the department to deal with that? So it takes a period of 12 months, so that we then give ourselves time to verify all the documentation that are submitted by the applicants, amongst others, issues of permits as indicated, and the IDs, the police clearance from the person who submitted documents from the country of origin, and that communication between us and that country at times takes a bit of time, but we've given ourselves a period of 12 months to make sure that everything is finalized. And once finalized, then a naturalization certificate is granted to that particular person. I believe most of the questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, Minister, Deputy Minister, honourable members. I think there was a request with regard to the criteria for general work visa. So an employer to have a foreign worker who's on a general work visa would need to show that they have tried to get a local person, they've advertised for the position, they've done everything possible to have a local person employed, and they're able to then go to the Department of Labour with the evidence to say, can I recruit a foreign national? If that's approved, then they can receive applications for a foreign national, which then allows that person to apply for a general work visa. The second issue related to what defines good cause within asylum applications. When an asylum seeker comes to our ports of entry or comes to the country, they're basically saying to South Africa that they need international protection, they feel they are facing persecution in their home country. And on that basis, we would give a person a 5-day visa to report to a refugee office. If they've been in the country longer than that period, they need to go to an immigration officer and indicate that they had valid reasons for not having applied, on arrival in this country. So in some cases, we have people who've been here for 10 years, or people who are found to be illegal in the country, and as they are about to be deported, say they want to apply for asylum, to frustrate the deportation process. In those cases, we do an interview to say, to establish good cause, to then allow you to proceed to a refugee office or to take you to a refugee office whilst in detention. So the good cause process basically allows you to approach a refugee office outside of the time period stipulated in the Migration Act. I think those were the two questions for me. Thanks, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and honourable members. Maybe I should start with the question that Honourable Ngubane raised, and I think some other members, about the good presentations and whether what we have presented here will materialize. Honourable members, since the Vulundlela report, myself, DG, and we're led by DG, the presidency has stocktake meetings that we go quarterly. You go there and they assess your progress. They assess whether the good presentations are being implemented. So that is, and then they give us a report card to the president as well of how departments are performing. So we are being monitored as a Vulundlela team by the presidency and treasury themselves. So there's a member of treasury and presidency, and our DG leads the team when we go to the union buildings. Similarly to that is that we present to our M, which is chaired by Minister. We also are monitored through the EXCO, which is presented by DG. So I'm not saying that the good stories will become a reality. All I'm saying is there's monitoring mechanisms quite strongly, not only within the department, Chair, but from the presidency directly. So let me get to some of the other questions. Honourable Roos, the one on SAQA, it remains a problem, probably for applicants, and the similar problem we had with the professional organizations that I indicated that you need to get a certification from the Engineering Council of South Africa, for example. So we have a MOU with SAQA at the moment, helping us with the backlog so that we can verify the SAQA certifications very quickly. But I understand there will still be a problem for somebody trying to get a SAQA report there. And I was just discussing with DG that we probably for example, we're using proof of application. Maybe we can consider that, so while we can assess the application, and because we have direct link with SAQA, so probably look at sharing the administrative burden of SAQA with the applicant and Home Affairs, because locally here we have a more direct and quicker turnaround time with SAQA than with foreign applicants there trying to get a SAQA certificate. But yeah, it's something that... Then again, Honourable Ngubane, is the one on the... DG spoke about the critical skill list. Yes, it's headed by, like DG said, Department of Higher Education and Training. So even though it's published by Home Affairs and the Minister, it's led, the research, the consultations is led by Higher Education. There's SAQA, there's NETLAC involvement, there's Labour involvement, there's public opinion involvement, there's a number of workshops we have, and there's representations from, I mentioned in a presentation, the veterinarians. So that organization will submit a request to say, include us into the critical skills list. The Minister would then ask the research to be done by Higher Education, so etc. So what I'm trying to say is it's a quite extensive research when it gets to the critical skills list. And it's not Home Affairs who sits there and decides who should be on the list and who should not be on the list. It's actually that very comprehensive consultation process. Then, Honourable Member, all the questions on consultation, I was engaging with our advocate who dealt with the public comments that we received. And he indicated that we received very few public comments. We did receive comments from NETLAC on the regulations, and that was important. We went to NETLAC, we presented the regulations as well. So we have received some comments, but it was not extensive, and that's why we could publish the second amendment fairly quickly after the first one, because we could consider those comments and then publish. On the limit of the number for the points-based system, there's actually just a minimum number you should have. It's not how many points you get, it's a minimum, what we call a threshold. So if you get 80 points, just for example, or 100, then you would meet the criteria for a work visa. But I want to then come into what Honorable Moshe was saying about police clearance. I want to tie it in that even though you meet the criteria, there's just a technical criteria. The security, the police clearance must still be there. That's the first criteria, it's national security. So you might have the qualifications and all of that, but if we check Interpol, if we check your police clearance, if we check the local police clearance, if we check the blacklisting, the V lists, and you are then on any of those lists, you're not going to get the visa. That's the first criteria. So national security is there, and also we're not removing the police clearance certificate. That's, instead of, I was using the example of the 60-year-old, instead of from the age of 80 till 60, which is 42 years, getting police clearance for 42 years, now we're saying the last 5 years. Because we're still going to check Interpol, we're still going to check police, we're still going to check V-lists and all of that. So I think it's just a misunderstanding for the Honourable Member, but security is still there. I was just saying that we're looking at the administrative burden, lessening that, but not the security burden remains as it is. Then whether 108 of the employers were enough, well, we published for 1 month and 108 applied. And since we commenced in March, 71 is met the criteria and was appointed. And since then, there's been an outcry for more. So you are quite right, Honourable Member. For us, we wanted to start small. When you launch a new scheme, you don't take 1,000 and then you collapse and it doesn't work. So now with the 71, we have a dedicated team, and it doesn't just go into the stream of all adjudicators. It goes to a dedicated team in the large account unit that deals with employers' visa applications. Now that we've worked out the process from March until now, we know the team is fully acquainted, the employers know how to submit, and the communication is there. Now we feel confident we can open up again for more. And like DG was saying, all the big companies are there. For example, DG Ford Ranger was launched here. We always use that as example. And Ford said if we don't, there were 200 technicians that they needed to launch the Ford Bucky Ranger in South Africa. If we hadn't issued those visas, Ford was going to take that to some other country and launch it there. So that's part of what the Trusted Employer Scheme is trying to do. Is to say businesses come and launch whatever you want here and we'll give you visas fast as possible. The question on the impact. I think the impact is what Vulundlela always asks us. We must measure the impact. And part of Vulundlela Phase 2 is actually about impact. Because as we indicated, once we now publish the regulations and persons become applying for remote work visa, we start using the points-based system, the startup visa, then we can measure the impact. Now we've measured the impact of Trusted Employer Scheme because that's why we have to open up again. The impact of reducing the documents is clear because it helps people to apply more efficiently, less burden for them. But it's one of the areas, you're absolutely right, is that what is the impact that we go? And I can maybe just also say that the impact of the Trusted Employer Scheme was so good is that when we had an outcry for tourist groups from China and India, we said, yes, let's use this model that's working currently and see how we can adapt it to the tourism market. So that is also an impact we felt on this one, and now we're saying we can roll it out to some other area within the Department of Home Affairs. Who's monitoring the startup, the new businesses? That is driven by DTIC. They're the specialists when it comes to business visas. They also issue recommendations and certifications for businesses. They're registered with DTIC as well. So we work collaboratively with DTIC when it comes to monitoring and measuring businesses. I've spoken about the police. I think lastly on tax, just to add, DJ has spoken about tax implication. Honorable Chair, you raised that. It's one of the key areas for remote work visa is double taxation. That's the issue that scares away remote workers, nomads coming here, that you work abroad, you have to pay tax there. When you come to South Africa, you must pay tax here. There's countries who waive tax for those workers. So we have to be competitive with that. Now we've been working with SARS, and SARS has indicated they can exempt you only for 183 days, which is about 6 months. But then they speak about treaties that they have, the exemptions as well in terms of the tax laws. So SARS is best to speak about this, but for us we want the remote workers to come here 6 months every year. Some call them swallows. They want to come here because the weather is good at a certain time of the year. They want to come and help us with the economy. So it's backwards SARS at the moment to look at this, because SARS was looking at 6 months, we can give you that, not paying tax for 3-year period. But for us, we want to issue the visa, yes, over 3-year period, but what's the tax implication, Honorable Chair? But I might not give a very good explanation now, but if SARS is here, I'm sure they will do much better. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Gia?
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think most of the questions have really been dealt with by the technical team. Probably just to add a few issues. The first one is that when we deal with the issue of these visa reforms, I think we should look at them as enablers that underpin part of the achievements that the government of national unity wants to build. The issue of economic growth. And we have to balance that with the security situation of the country, because those go hand in hand. A country that is not secure can't grow economically, and you can't secure a country that is not growing. So they build up all together, and that is the spirit in terms of the Operation Vulindlela that brought all these reforms. And I think we must also assure the committee of our commitment of both economic growth as well as doing it within a secure environment. And because in the country, we don't have a problem with the movement of people. Movement of people is a global phenomenon. You can't stop it. People will move from one country to the other. The only issue that you have to deal with is the illegal movement of people that you must then curtail. So the laws, the processes, and the systems are meant to do exactly that. And the issues have been raised by the Vulindlela report obviously then requires us to do some supplementary work in terms of the white paper so that all those issues are factored in there. And I think we take the spirit that the committee is raising the issues. The proposals, Honorable Ngubane, are actually not Ferrari kind of proposals that are being made. These, in terms of global standards, are actually basic, because we are playing catch-up. If you look at the issue of the digital nomad, it's something that's happening all over. If you look at the issue of e-gates, the movement of people, all those things are happening already in other countries, but we are trying to catch up. So we are building from that experience so that we can also catch up with what is happening in the world. I think also there is a difference between the issue of the digital nomads and as well as the issue of tourist visas. Tourist visas are purely for visiting. They have a set period of time. They are not coming here for work. They don't have any tax implications on that. One of the things that was introduced with COVID was the ability to work in digital spaces, which means you find a person employed in America, but they could work here. And when they do, they spend just on economic impact. First thing they do when they come here, they buy groceries. They buy groceries where? In South Africa. When they pay rent where? In South Africa. When they buy property in South Africa. Clothing and everything else. Which means that in terms of consumption, our economy then goes up. Which means that we're able to get more people on the job through this kind of investment of these people who will then come into South. So I don't think that we need to look at them as people who are just coming in to just take. I'm happy with the issue of the BMA. I think, Chair, you are quite correct. when it's time for us to deliver the annual report for the BMA, we need to come here and deliver it and say these are the achievements, these have been our shortfalls in the BMA. In the main, we are having a funding problem with the BMA. And I think it's something that we have canvassed quite thoroughly during the budget vote, I think as part of other portfolio committees that we have dealt with. On the issue of our inability to grow, we have a problem. And our inability to grow our human capital is not because we don't want to hire people, but it's because of the rules. There is a standard COE cap that has been given to us by Treasury that says you can't spend more than this on your cost to employees. And when that happens, you can't sit back and say, okay, I will operate in this way. We have to look at innovative ways. Part of building a digital-first Home Affairs is to make sure that we place less reliant on human presence and place reliance on working with computers in a digital environment. Not that we are taking people's jobs away, but there is already a cap. We can't hire more people. Every time we have to go make a business case, you realize that, no, it's not going to work. So you need to look at alternative ways. And I think the partnerships with the private sector have also assisted us. On the issue of the anti-African posture in terms of migration, I don't think it's really there. I mean, if you are to, for instance, look at our neighbors in terms of when we're entering into reservations. South Africa is one of the countries that did not enter reservations. But look at our neighbors that we are saying they feel that we are pushing them away. They entered into reservations, and no one said, no, you are being anti-African for entering into those reservations. So we need to observe those things and not develop just a myth that, no, South Africa is anti-African. I don't think that is true. And on the issue of the late birth registration, I think there is a problem that we need to look at. And I was whispering to the minister here that the process, we started by engaging Department of Health. Please make it free for indigents to do the paternity test, because you can't take it away. If you are going to take away the paternity test, I can tell you, you will have a huge influx. A father can come and say, these are my 10 children. They were all born in the same year, because it's biologically possible to claim that. So all those things are entered with an intention of providing an internal control that is a deterrent. But how do we make it easy? For instance, you will find that in the private sector, it's cheaper to do a paternity test than it is to do it with the Department of Health. You look at the turnaround times with the private sector, it's cheaper to do it there, it's quicker than with the Department of Health. So we need to explore those options and look at our regulations on how we can make it easier so that the children do not suffer whilst we maintain our internal control standards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, dear Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the colleagues who've responded, including the DM. I think that's really comprehensive in terms of the response. Let me just add a couple of additional points in conclusion then, if I may, Chair. I think this issue about funding keeps coming up, and I wonder the extent to which the committee may want to engage with Treasury actually on this, because we end up speaking sort of on their behalf sometimes, and we don't really have the answer. So I think that might be something to look into and get the perspective from their side as well, especially when it comes to the BMA, but also some critical sectors inside Home Affairs. I mean, just this morning, just to latch on what DM says, I was speaking at an investor conference, Rand Merchant Bank, Morgan Stanley, and I made the point that no one wants to invest in a country that doesn't have control of its internal security. It's an economic argument as well. So I think it was well put to say that these things feed into each other. You need a growing economy if you're going to fund basically the reconstruction of our border management system. But at the same time, you need to have at least a minimum level of internal security to attract and generate economic growth. So these things do in fact feed into each other. And I think that's where the opportunities lie while we're going to hopefully grow the economy meaningfully over the coming few years, generate the tax revenue we need, and then invest that into modernizing our systems, there is only one shortcut really, and that is through automation and taking the advantages that we can through technology. And that's where it tops up really our capacity. I think in this vein, the points-based system for work visas does have an interesting element of automation, because essentially what it does is it creates an objective set of criteria to say, if you have this kind of qualification, if you've got a job offer of R1 million, if you've got this number of years of experience, you know, the adjudication doesn't become something subjective. You can have a small spreadsheet or a tool where an adjudicator can simply say, yes, has this job offer, yes, has this qualification, and the points get added up, and it creates more transparency and certainty in the process as well. So these are small things, but that's where we have to start, given the constraints that we have. I was even saying one of the things we may want to look at is to create a little calculator. You know how SARS has a calculator on their website, and you can go actually and sort of see what the implications are for you in terms of tax. If we get this points-based system right, we may want to create something similar where someone who's thinking about applying can actually go and fill in their details and get an indication of whether they will be successful or not. And you remove that human discretion, the uncertainty out of the process. And so I think it's also exciting for that reason to bring more objectivity into how work visas go, because that's fundamental, again, on the economic side and on the security side. Because if you've got an objective measure and someone gets a work visa but they don't have enough points, now you can go and say, well, hang on, how was this thing issued? But as long as you have the discretion and you don't have that kind of view of how decisions are made, that's where the problem really comes in. So these are small steps, Chair. As I say, this is not, you know, fixing everything overnight, but they move us in that direction. I think just in terms of the timelines and the white paper, just to be clear, I think it was March 2027. That date was the original date. That's not something that you know, we came up with. That is the extent of the process that would have to be followed, even in the space that we're already in. So it's a very extensive process, Chair. I think we have to be very honest with each other, because what I don't want us to have, and I think we can probably all agree on this, is we don't want a situation where, you know, let's be very honest now with each other. We've seen bills being signed, and then there's more work to build consensus even after the bill becomes an act. We have an example from the weekend. So what I'm suggesting is let's find the consensus up front, because then we know there will be none of these issues going forward, especially in a space where we've got 10 parties that have to also find that consensus amongst each other. That's the reality of it, Chair, to answer the question directly. And my suggestion to the committee is let's do that groundwork now, so that by the time we put the bill on the table, we actually know there's not going to be things that come and bite us like we see in some other cases now. Yes, there will be a slight delay because of that, but I think it's better to do that now than to do it at the end and create a real, you know, issue. Just to also be absolutely clear, the work that Operation Vulindlela is doing and that Mr. Simons presented here, they really deserve a tip of the cap, because they are working precisely because there are not legislative changes that they're currently looking at. In other words, the law as it is written, the Immigration Act, for example, it provides for certain visa categories. But we are now saying it's the year 2024, and there's new opportunities that are emerging, and they are doing incredible work trying to fit new opportunities into the existing law. But there is a process underway from the presidency, including the work from Genesis that the DG mentioned, to actually also come to us and say, but in addition to, you know, tinkering around the edges, for lack of a better word, what could be some legal amendments that take advantage of these opportunities as well? And it is those proposals that we would like to bring to the committee and say, let's consider them as part of the white paper, because then we don't have to come with 10 different fragmented bills. We do a comprehensive reframing, which is exactly what the white paper is looking for. I do, however, also just want to say, Chair, that we mustn't create the impression amongst South Africans that any white paper or any piece of policy is a silver bullet in any space. The comment that has been repeated over and over in today's meeting is you can have good laws, but they don't mean anything if they're not properly implemented. And that is why I think it's so important to also be clear to each other that there are constraints on administration that we need to address, and nothing prevents us. There's no rule that says write the white paper before you deal with the backlog at the refugee appeals process, for example, that was mentioned. Those are administrative issues, and those are things that we need to move on, again, partially through resourcing, but also through the reforms that we need to bring. Because you can write a new law today, that backlog will still be there. The court judgments from the Constitutional Court that are, creating a space in this environment will still be there. And so I think the line is that we mustn't think that we can fix the administration through legislation. We must fix the administration through actual reform. That's the technology stuff we're talking about. It's the regulatory work that we presented today. And we must do both of these things. We must then have legislation that aligns with a fixed administration. But we mustn't confuse those two things, because otherwise you'll have a potentially fantastic law, but your administration doesn't mean anything in practice. It's not happening on the ground. So that's the perspective, I think, on that, Chair. I think that point is taken loud and clear. We're not defensive about it. The points about implementation and that you would like to see what you saw on the slide becoming reality is definitely something that we're open to receiving. We hear you loud and clear, and that's certainly what we also want. We don't want to be a department that gets told we do good presentations, but then that's where it ends. So we will take that on board and follow through aggressively as we've done in this process. And really, Chair, I think this is the bottom line. When we talk about the tour operator scheme, for example, to look at tourism from China and India, we must be able to come back here and say a year from now, whatever the case may be, what are the tourism numbers looking like from China? Because that's the outcome that we're looking for, not just the output. We can make a nice output on the screen. But if we come back to you and we say, listen, we had 93,000 tourists from China in this past year, which is the actual number, and we come back to you and we say, but you know what, it's now 150,000 or 190,000. That's where I think you're seeing the impact on the ground, because every single one of those tourists who come here are contributing to the South African economy and creating jobs. So I would welcome that, Chair, and I hope the officials would be with me. Measure us on those things. Say, this is what you said you will do. What's the real world impact? The same would go for the points-based visa, bringing those skills in. And Chair, if I may say, on the critical skills list, the whole point is to reduce the skills shortage. We are trying to address the skills shortage as it exists and as higher education tells us that it exists. So the whole point would be over time that as you bring in those skills, the need for this would decrease because you've brought the skills, all right? I mean, you're plugging the hole. And then on the other side is the training aspect. That's not in a Home Affairs domain. But of course, we all want a world where all of these 21st century skills are being produced by our universities, and the colleagues here that are on those committees should really take this message from Home Affairs as well, to say, the best outcome here is that we don't need skills. But the reality is today, we are told by Treasury that it is the second most powerful thing we can do to create jobs for South Africans in this country, right after load shedding, is bringing in skills. That's not me saying that, that's National Treasury's own research. So they talk about 7 jobs for South Africans for every highly skilled individual. So that's the contribution we're trying to make in the job creation space, which, as everyone here said, is really the apex priority. We understand it's the most critical need. And then finally, Chair, I would conclude by saying, on the civic side, we haven't talked about that a lot today, but I'm sure in other engagements we will again. To just finish with Mr. Mabuso, who touched on the channels. Planting the seed now, because I'm sure we'll get back to it, but please think about another channel that we need to create collectively at Home Affairs, is the idea of Home Affairs at home. Because we can build offices, we can form partnerships, kiosks, trucks, we can do all of these things which are already there. and we still have instances of people not being reached. That's where the opportunity lies, I think, in moving into a space where someone can access Home Affairs either from their home through a smart device, they can go to a local library. I mean, a Home Affairs office should actually exist in a community centre. If there's a laptop, for example, in an impoverished community. And creating that new channel, I think, is also going to be very important to making sure that even as we deal with the national security issues, we deal with the economic focus that we've spoken about today, we actually improve service delivery for people on the ground. And those are really the three, I think, overall things that we need to be achieving. So thank you very much, Chair. That's it from our side.
Thanks very much, honourable members, and thanks very much, Minister, for the update. Two issues we'll deal with. We'll monitor the work that we received here, and we'll call the department to update on the progress.